Good evening, peepers. This is Jeepers, and let's just get right into this one, shall we? I think I've been working at a place that doesn't exist anymore. Listen, man. The curly-headed giant who stood across from me held his breath and cocked his head. His eyes were large and vacant, staring off into nothingness. His gaze sat just above my shoulders. I turned to look behind me to see what his eyes were fixed upon. The giant freezer door stood ominously tall, a mess of random stickers littered across its surface like a neon vomit. I winced at how bright it seemed to be. My flesh then started to warm and prickle. A soft flurry of hot breaths began to push at the base of my neck. I turned quickly, taking a hasty step backwards. The curly-haired man, my boss, stood hunched over. His eyes wide and gaped mouth were merely inches away. Still, his gaze stayed fixed upon that freezer door. Suddenly, as though they were being pulled by strings through wet cement, his pupils met mine. Sorry about that. I think I have a migraine. His voice was robotic. It felt unusually rehearsed, as opposed to his normal, jovial attitude. He turned and walked stiffly towards the line before pulling out a tub of diced onions. He reached into the tub far deeper than needed to be, and white chunks were now enveloping his wrist. You been working since this morning or something? I asked, though my voice came out at just above a whisper. I felt afraid, even though the atmosphere at my job always seemed to be so light. He raised his eyebrows, keeping his gaze fixed upon the onion mound. Suddenly his hand rose from the tub as he brought an enormous handful to his mouth. The whirring and buzz of the kitchen were soon drowned out by the wet gnashing of raw onions in my boss's mouth. The stench seemed to be all too encompassing. A minute passed by of that wretched chewing, then another, as I paused to look down at my hands. The red eye and the bird tattoo on my forearm appeared to dart back and forth at an alarming speed. I could feel my heart pounding against my chest. I looked back up. The lights overhead cast a harsh glow which made the kitchen appear as though it was made of clay. I darted for the bathroom, trying to keep as much distance between myself and my boss as I bobbed along. He swept his hand in front of me, stopping me in my tracks. Here, this'll make you feel better. His hand hovered over the pit of stinky onions before suddenly plunging into it with such ferocity. I couldn't help but be enamored by the grotesque spectacle before me. His hand sloshed around the tub for a bit, slinging chunks in the process, before excavating yet another large handful of the stuff. He brought the pile just below my nose. My eyes began to well up with tears. I tried my best to swallow the lump which had formed in my throat, though it did little to free the knot. I looked up into my boss's eyes, still vacant, staring at his own trembling hand as chunks of onion began slithering down to the floor. I just need a cigarette. I'll be right back, I blurted out as I pushed past the large man, passing that freezer door and skittering down the hallway next to it. The hallway seemed to stretch and lengthen itself as my pace quickened even further. I swear I could feel the floor beginning to stick and tear at my feet, as though it were beginning to melt, pulling me down with it. It all came to a sudden stop, my head buzzing like a full hive would in the summertime. I opened my eyes and was blinded by the lights as I stared at the ceiling above. Calmness washed over my being. I had nearly lost my cool. Silly me, running to the exit door. I really need to get some meds or something. I stood up, brushing all the dirt and grime off my shirt as much as I could, before pushing the door open. The cool fall air was electric against my clammy skin, though it was a welcome change from the poorly ventilated kitchen. I leaned against the wooden fence, which lined the exterior of our bar and grill. Funny where life takes you, huh? Maybe teachers are more truthful than we thought. I pulled the crumpled up pack of Newports out of my pocket and fished out a particularly crooked one, bringing it up to my lips. There's something so oddly satisfying about the spark of a worn-out Bic lighter. Maybe because it wasn't supposed to last that long anyways? As the flame connected with the tip of my cigarette, a series of blinding flashes emanated from the back of the parking lot. I took a long drag and sneakily peered around the edge of the fence. My heart beat an unsteady, painful hum. Oddly, the back was brimming with cars as opposed to its usual barren state. Even stranger, with the hazard lights blinking perpetually on each and every one of them. I blinked a few times, rubbed my temple. The harsh throbbings of a headache had begun to take hold of my weary mind. A few more drags, and I had finally worked up the courage to truly begin my shift. I pushed the back door open. The lights seemed to have dimmed down some. I walked slowly, calculate down the hallway, and hesitantly peered into the kitchen. My boss stood, hunched over the cutting board, hiding whatever laid upon it with the crook of his elbow. His eyes seemed bloodshot and intense, staring vigorously at whatever it was he was covering. "What you doing, Alan?" I tried to say in the friendliest tone I can muster. It's hard to seem relaxed when you have to tell yourself to do so. My muscles seemed to ache, the tenseness all too consuming. I swore I could hear his neck crack and whine as his head shifted slowly towards me. His eyes were absolutely crimson, and chills ran up and down my spine. I couldn't stop myself, and my feet began to tremble and fall backwards as the kitchen started to spin. Deep breath. Deep breath. It's a surprise. The ends of his lips began to pull up harshly, revealing gums and plaque-etched teeth. My eyes remained glued to him as the environment surrounding his being began to grow hazier. The pans hanging from the walls appeared to melt and drip down to the floor. I rubbed my eyes again. "Will you go get the waitress?" he said, the usual gentle tone I've grown accustomed to seeming to return. The atmosphere lightened once more as my muscles pushed me through the kitchen and out into the dining room. Empty. The whole place was empty. I scanned the dining room, left to right. The air felt so thick, so joyous, and full, despite my desolate surroundings. The waitress stood at the register, eyes darting wildly to and fro as she whispered quietly to herself. Not out of the ordinary for Rainey, but I decided to check up on her anyways. Her gaze stayed fixed upon the register as I drew closer. Rainey wrung her hands wildly, flexing her fingers in odd, inhuman directions as her eyes seemed to bulge and dart in otherworldly speed. "Hey, are you—" I set my hand on her shoulder, and that's when she began to scream. Mournful, echoing screeches that threatened to shatter my eardrums. I recoiled and fell backwards. My body stiffened as it fell against a warm, meaty surface. Two massive hands suddenly collapsed on my chest. The bloody stumps where fingers should have been clawed at me with terrifying fervor. I dropped down to my ass and pushed myself up against the wall behind the counter. I cradled myself and began rocking. See what I mean? My boss foamed, lowering his face to mine, bringing his mangled hands up just below my chin. Streaks of blue danced and squirmed in my vision as that familiar haze took hold once more. I squeezed my eyes shut, and I tried to hum to drown out those wretched noises. Open your eyes! Open your fucking eyes! He wailed, poking me sharply with the bony knobs of what were once his fingers. Finally, I gave in. I screamed, crying out for help, for my parents, for anyone who would listen. Hey man, are you good? A sudden coolness fell over me, the claustrophobic heat and terror only a fleeting thing now. My eyelids pulled themselves slowly upwards, revealing the dim glow of the sinking sun. I found myself standing, or rather propped up against a bench on the sidewalk next to my workplace. Only now it appeared to be empty. Years displaced from any sort of human activity. The white paint which adorned the squatty building was flecked with ashen streaks of black. I turned to the stranger who was holding my arm, hastily pulling it away from him. What the fuck happened here? I said, pointing at the sad building that once was. He turned and studied the building for a moment, his brow furrowed as a solemn weight seemed to pull at his eyes. He cleared his throat. Gas leak, man. Place burned up last year. 2 people died in that fire. He grabbed my shoulder and gave it a gentle squeeze. Don't you remember? Well, yeah, I have like only one theory for, or 2 theories for that. Either he was wigging out about his boss in the afterlife, or he literally did for a minute see that place like a Silent Hill scenario. Anyways, if you enjoyed that spooky tale, make sure to chop the like button up with a meat cleaver. Stay safe, don't stay out late, and remember to always be kind, my fellow creeps. GB is off.